Okay.
And then you can use and press on those to X to
Okay.
move the thing forward or however.
So I just talk in, and are they able to be heard?
I don't know. I don't think they're able to be heard.
Okay. Good morning to you both. How you doing? Will they type?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Typing. Yep. Perfect.
Great to hear. Good morning, Blair. Great to have you here. Okay, well, let's get started. As you see, this is Recovery Coaching and our webinar series, your first session with recovery. Let's move forward and see where we're going. Over the next hour or so, what we're going to cover is creating a safe place, introducing yourself to the recovery and to the process, the roles and responsibilities both for yourselves as well as the recovery in the process. We'll talk a bit about empathic responses because that's an important piece of our connecting with people initially. We'll talk about introducing the recovery wellness plan and the completion of any required paperwork after the session. And then we'll talk about action steps and review of the session. Any questions on the agendas as it presented so far? I'd like this to be very interactive. I want you to ask what you need to ask because I think that will allow me to be in my constant mode of being a learner, doer, and teacher, and hopefully this will help for you as well. So any questions on where we're going? Excellent. Let's move on then. Let's talk about creating a safe place. Remember in the Recovery Coach Academy, we developed a working agreement because creating a safe place was very important relative to people coming in and feeling the ability and the willingness to be intimate with each other to develop a relationship or partnerships that work. And clearly when we talk about working one-to-one and with recoverees, the same process will be helpful. In thinking about creating a safe place, we suggest you select a location that will be conducive to the process of coaching. When you hear that line, select a location that will be conducive to the process of coaching, what does that say to you? Not crowded, busy, quiet, conducive to the process of coaching. Able to listen. Not crowded, not busy, quiet, able to listen. Well stated. No distractions such as say, yep, you got it. Exactly. Another opportunity of creating a safe place is being cognizant of the issues such as ease of access, enough privacy to have an intimate conversation, informality, etc. And some of the things that both Blair and Fel, you both already mentioned. We suggest that you arrive a bit early. Why would that be? Why would there be a suggestion that you arrive a bit early to the location that's going to be conducive to the process? Why would you arrive a bit earlier? How would that be helpful or important? Excellent. Yes. And when you talk about settling ourselves first, it's also making sure that the things that we believe are conducive to the process, the things that are being cognizant of the issues that may or may not get in the way of the process, we can check them out before the session starts. And the final point on the creating a safe place is behaving in a way that is comforting and nurturing. Talk to me about that. How do you behave in a way that is comforting and nurturing, especially in initial connection or contact with a recovery? Nice. Acknowledge the person you're with. Inquire about their state of being. Be open, quiet, smile often when appropriate. And in my effort to be comforting and nurturing, I do all those things, and it helps me to pay attention to its heart and meaning for the recovery. For me, that's the way of the caregiver. That's the way of offering support. It's paying attention with heart and meaning for the other person. I'm there because I want to be there, and I want to be there to help. And I want to be there in a way that comforts and nurtures the process. Any thoughts or questions on this piece that we're talked so far about creating a safe place? Any thoughts or questions or comments? Can we move on? Yes, thank you. Introducing ourselves is important as well. And the introductions are myself and the recovery. You briefly introduce yourself using the name, your recovery status, who you represent, if anyone, and a few statements geared towards creating a warm and safe environment. And then allow the recovery to introduce themselves as well. But taking that first part, briefly introduce yourself in a way that you might introduce yourself to recovery. And I'm especially important to hear what might be a few statements geared towards creating that safe and warm environment. What might you say in a few statements that would create a warm and safe environment? Hmm? I saw. Cool. Excellent. Very good. Very good. Please remember, I'm here to help you. I'll follow where you lead, etc. That's a nice comment by Blair. Phil, I'm glad we're together. I look forward to whatever transpires here today. Yeah, being open to the process and not attached to any outcomes is such a critical part of creating that warm and safe environment. I'm especially like the fact that I'm here for you. Remember in the Recovery Coach Academy, it's about the recovery. It's not about me. And I want to set that tone up front. I want to be able to have the recovery believe and perceive that that their needs are important and we're there to help in the process of that. Any other thoughts or comments relative to creating that warm and safe environment? Do you feel comfortable with that concept? Excellent. I especially like this piece of introduction around the recovery to introduce themselves. Please let me know what you would like me to know about you. That's a very powerful statement. So many times people expect questions coming from us to dig and delve into who they are, and we frame the questions as the helper and tend not to leave it open enough for the person to share who they are. So please tell me what you would like me to know about you. I think it's a very potent concept or thought. What do you think about that? Yes, I agree, Phil. Very powerful. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Blair. When I talk about help, and this is my own social work practice that I utilize, help is a humble effort to learn power. And both of you have touched upon my concept of power. I like the word power as an acronym, POWER. Partnerships overcoming weakness, empowering responsibility. Putting the concept that the power is in the recovery's hands, and you both use that word, powerful, and the power role, putting them in that role. We are coaches following their lead as much as possible. So that partnership, that powerful partnership is beginning to be developed as we introduce ourselves to the recovery and we ask that they introduce themselves to us. And many times, again, I think it's the first time they may have heard that request. Please tell me what you would like me to know about you. Think about that power. Think about how embracing that is. And again, it ties into Andrews Arian's fourth circle. The way to wisdom is to be open to the outcome and not attached to it. So my ability to say up front, I want you to guide me, to let me know who you are and what down the road, what you need in this process, is a very powerful start. Any other thoughts or questions on the introductory piece? Are you comfortable with it? Good to hear. How you doing, Beth? Here she comes. Yes. Great. Welcome, Beth. Can we move on? Yep, I love it. I love that yuppers. It's like my granddaughter's KK. The process. In this, you want to briefly discuss what the session will look like and how long it will last. And you clearly want to have that in your own head. And I usually jot notes to myself to have an overview of what we're going to be talking about. State that you will be going over the roles and responsibilities. And if you're considered a mandatory reporter, you need to state this up front. Briefly discuss what the session will look like and how long it will last. State that you'll be looking over the roles and responsibilities. And if you consider a mandatory reporter, you need to state this. Any questions about this, the beginning of this process? Okay, let's move on. With regards to roles and responsibilities, establish with recovery that this is their process. It's about them. It's not about me. That you are here to support their recovery. Question becomes, what can I do to help your recovery today? That's the key question that floats through this whole process. Go over in your own words a simple description of a recovery coach and the roles of a recovery coach, and discuss some of the recovery's responsibilities, such as making appointments, being on time, being responsible for their own recovery plan. Let's take this one at a time. Establishing with the recovery that this is their process, that you are there to support their recovery. What can I do to help your recovery is a critical part of this. In your own words, how would you describe recovery coach? You're sitting with recovery in a first session. You don't have any cheat sheets in front of you. You've embraced information through the Recovery Coach Academy and your ongoing learning. How do you describe, in your own words, a recovery coach? Excellent. Excellent. I like those. So when you speak to a leverage for their efforts, expand on that for me, because I'm not sure if I'm sitting with you, I'm going to understand what leverage means. Oh yeah, Phil. That's interesting to say the least. Yeah, keep it simple. In classic sense, leverage or pulley systems allow the movement of a far greater weight with less than normal effort. Yes, yes, yes. You alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. So leverage or support or guidance or commitment to the process that the recovery is experiencing helps the process. Yeah, I like that. Counterweight. Okay. So much of this is guidance, it's support, it's that counterweight, it's that leverage, it's helping them to look at where they're going. I like the image of being there to offer support for their efforts, sort of like a safety net. Yes, 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 yes. And I share that with people just to comfort them and to offer them an opportunity to appreciate that I'm in this with them. It's almost like being in the foxhole with them. Great. In discussing some of the recovery's responsibilities is making appointments, being on time, being responsible for their recovery plan, any other responsibilities that you would think of that aren't listed there that you might want to think about in working with recoveries and discussing with them up front their responsibilities in this process? Yes. Yes. Well stated. Well stated. The responsibility. It's really about being able to respond. Being able to respond to coming to the appointments, being able to respond to following through on the tasks of the recovery wellness plan, being able to respond to the guidance that's being offered, being able to respond to the desire and the need to ask for help. You're right on it, folks. The responsibility is theirs, and we want to make sure that they appreciate that the responsibility is theirs. And also in the midst of that, gaining a sense of their ability and willingness to follow through on that responsibility. Any other thoughts or questions on this slide? Thoughts, comments, or questions? Okay, let's move on. Continue to talk about roles and responsibilities. You may want to spend a few minutes developing your own set of working agreements with the recovery. You may want to talk about the partnership that is inherent in recovery coaching, such as we're all learners, doers, and teachers, and we're both responsible for creating a safe and helpful process. I think you've all already talked about this, so this is the new information. Have you thought about developing a working agreement in your work with individual recoveries? I think it makes big sense. Have you thought about it? Have you come up with anything? What would be some of the elements of that working agreement as you think about it? Building on that concept of parameters of expectations, Fel, what would be some of those expectations that you would verbalize? Um, there we go. Tone, language, cell phone etiquette. Okay. Yes, I like that. I like Beth putting something in people's hands that they walk away with, and that's constant to the conversations that we're having. Talks about availability, mandated reporting. Excellent. Letting people know up front. Yeah, I like that, Blair. Fantastic. I love the collaboration, folks. I think for me, one of the exciting parts of doing a webinar such as this is that we get to collaborate long distance, and this is good stuff. This is very good stuff. Any other thoughts or questions on this slide? Roles and responsibility. I think you get it. I think it's important to set the expectations up front, and also at some level, I set the expectations high. When I say that, I think the higher we set the expectations, the greater opportunity we have for success. Expand on that for me, Phil. Does this point set the expectation for a relationship dynamic? Make that simpler for me. Mm, yeah, I like that. That's a nice statement, Beth. It's all about expectations. There have been studies of teaching. If the coach sets parameters as opposed to the recovery, is the relationship not as powerful as a learn? Correct. 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 So let's be careful that we're talking about spending a few times developing your own set of working agreements. That's a partnering activity. We want to engage with the recovery again, much like we did in Recovery Coach Academy. What will make it comfortable and safe for you as we do our work? We're both responsible for creating a safe and helpful process. How do we do that? Might be the question that we ask to develop a set of working agreements. Hmm. Hmm. Nice point, Blair. Very nice point. I think the key point is partnering around the responsibilities, the roles, the working agreement. Locking ourselves into the mode of being open to the outcome and not attached to it, as evidenced by we're learners, doers, and teachers. And I think for each individual that we work with, the working agreement, the way that we'll work together may be different, and some points the same. Hmm. 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 Excellent. You all make good points, and please consider each of these points and begin to embrace it if it makes sense for you into your own art of developing coaching, because that's really what this is about. We talk about this first session. It's the first part of your beginning to develop your own art of coaching recovery. And I like this input that we're giving to each other because it broadens our perspectives on what can be. Anything else on this slide? Can we move on? KK. I love it, Beth. Empathy. Let's talk a minute about empathy and the role it has in being a successful coach. Teach me. What do you believe? Talk about empathy and the role it has in you being a successful coach. Hmm. Hmm. I agree with everything that everyone has said. It's the ability to put myself in another person's shoes. Many times as I'm sitting with people, I may say in my head, but for the grace of God, there go I, as a reminder to my ability to stay humble, to stay focused, to be in the moment with that person. Uh, Empathy is absolutely functional, foundational to being a coach. Uh, how would you describe or define empathy to a recovery? Keeping it simple. Hmm. Connection. Ability to put myself in their shoes. Connecting. I like that. For me, it's such when I think about connection, it's such a spiritual concept. It's such and that is so much of what this enterprise, this process lends itself to being. A spiritual process, a connection. I'm beginning to do more and more work on overcoming shame, and there's some authors who have been researching, and they look at the concept of vulnerability as an important part of connection. And I think that all goes into the mix. And my ability to be vulnerable is my ability to have empathy and to be able to understand and feel the feelings of another. Well stated, Blair. I love that. I'm going to take a picture of that and use that. I will not claim to know more about your experience than you do, but I will try to understand deeply. And I really lock into that concept of understanding deeply. Well stated. Is this transcriptable?
I'm gonna see if we can figure out a way.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in
Yeah.
here. I really like some of what they're saying. I see that two of you are typing, so we're just waiting for the information to come through. Mm. Passion is what this work is about, believe me. I mean, really, when you think about a passionate belief in an individual's ability that recovery can and does and will happen, I think we all have experience, at least it's been my experience and many people I've talked with, that there was someone who believed in me more than I believed in myself, and they had a passion in that belief that helped me to move through. So no sorry for the passion. And I enjoy the rambling because we're learning from each other. I'm clearly learning a lot about this concept. A couple of definitions of empathy that I was able to Google is one was a general definition that says what you've already stated. It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It's the capacity to share or recognize emotions experienced by another. And it's the experience of understanding another person's condition from their perspective, especially in the context of the capacity to share or recognize emotions experienced by another. It begins to speak of a concept of emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman and others have done a lot of great work in looking at emotional intelligence as a powerful resource and tool in change and personal development. And clearly one of the centerpieces of emotional intelligence is empathy. So you might want to check that out. Another definition that I looked at was by Psychology Today that embraces everything that you all have shared, I believe. It says that empathy is the experience of understanding another person's condition from their perspective. You place yourself in their shoes and feel what they are feeling. Empathy is known to increase pro-social helping behaviors. While American culture might be socializing people into becoming more individualistic rather than empathic, research has uncovered the existence of mirror neutrons, in quotation marks, which react to emotions expressed by others and then reproduce them. So in many ways, empathy is beginning to be uncovered as being a natural part of who we are. And I encourage you to look at Psychology Today. That definition of empathy was helpful. Phil, I see you're still typing. Is that the reality or is the computer stuck? Gotcha. Thank you. Can we move on? Great. Here we are, the Recovery Wellness Plan. Use the conversation around the response to how can I help support your recovery today to introduce the Recovery Wellness Plan. Does that make sense to you? Using the conversation related to the response from the recovery about how I can help support your recovery today to introduce the Recovery Wellness Plan. Can you see that transition? Can you see that as being a nice way to move into that talking about the plan? Have you had an opportunity to utilize a recovery wellness plan with someone in recovery? And what's been your experience? Hmm. Good. Good, Val. Hmm. Can you talk more about that, Beth? That's interesting because it's critical that we find a way to reach young adults and help me to hear how that's worked and how it's working for you and what that might look like. Hmm. I agree, Blair. As people are typing, I'm really interested, Blair, when you said it's powerful when we examine what is. What a great starting point. More times than not, people live through what they live through and don't get into that precious present and just look at what it is and then begin to understand what do I want and how do I begin to develop what I want. And as you're describing it, I think that's what recovery wellness planning can be about. What is, what I want it to be, and how am I going to get there? Developing a process of change. Mm, mm. Great. That's how it works. I like that concept, asking the questions to get their gears turning. What I say to people is that I ask good questions, and my questions are the questions that I ask are to get you to think about things that you may not have thought much about before. And that's helpful. And it helps them to take charge of their plan. It helps them to own their plan. And the concepts that come out in this learning, doing, teaching process and these conversations that matter that we have with recoveries is their ability to build on their own knowledge base, their own understanding, and move through. Hmm. Great. It is critical that we keep the process slow, that we do one or two goals at a time and the like. How do I get that down, Stace? To scroll that down. Well, I can't.
Best thing, you can, there's a little button on the side, you can, like a sidebar, if you go all the way over.
Over here?
Yep. Go all the way down on the chat. If you click on it and roll it up. Is it working?
Or is it this one?
Are you trying to read Blair's?
Yeah.
Okay, it says, I found it's a little like dealing with small children.
Hmm.
They can only, they can often only accomplish one big skill at a time.
Okay.
As they learn a new skill, sometimes they're previously on big vacation. So go slow enough and let them focus on what they can rather than on everything all at once.
That's Blair.
Mm-hmm.
Well stated, Blair. Well stated. I mean, they are like children. Think about the fact that so many of us in active addiction or in our emotional development get stuck in adolescence, and we're not able to answer those three questions of adolescence. So we are like children, and we do have to gain the skills to learn how to live. Beth says, I found that some people who've been, I lost it.
And who have been in the system
Okay.
that can get stuck and expect me to create goals for them,
Oh.
or they decide what they should be working on.
Okay.
It takes some cheerleading to remind them that they are resourceful, and I trust them to be in charge of their own recovery.
Wow. Well stated, Beth. Well stated. And that, for me, I really encourage people not to should on themselves, just because many times those shoulds that they bring into their heads end up beating them up and take away their own responsibility. Clearly, it's helping people to identify where they want to go versus where we might want them to go. Yes, I encourage them to let go of the shouldas and the ought tos and take away this. Yes, very much on it. Very much on it. Are you comfortable? Ooh. Are you comfortable with a conversation that matters around helping support their recovery through a recovery wellness plan? Are you comfortable with this process? Are you comfortable with the planning as you've identified it or utilized it thus far? Or are there any questions you might have around this utilization? And is it helpful? In continuing to think about the recovery wellness plan, let's add a couple more points. Talk about general hopes and desires. Beth says, yes, I really like that they own it with the young adults. I also have them do it in an appointment with me. If I send it home with them, I may never see it again. Yeah, that's been my experience as well. But it also demonstrates to the recovery that I believe it's important that they get this work done. And if they do it in front of me, it's still their work. Well done. As we think about helping people to discover and uncover and develop their wellness recovery plan, let's talk about their general hopes and desires. Might the recovery begin to formulate an overall recovery wellness goal? Does one of the 8 domains strike a chord for them as you're moving through the plan? And is there something the recovery might work on and bring into the next session? Again, this is the focus in our first session with the recovery as a way of beginning to engage them in a process of paying attention to what its heart and meaning for them through the utilization of the recovery wellness plan. Any other thoughts, questions, general comments related to recovery wellness planning? How many of you are you familiar with the concept of recovery capital? Excellent. How would you describe recovery capital to a recovery? Excellent, Beth. Do they understand it? Are they open to it? Do they appreciate the value it has in the recovery process? Yes. Excellent. And your statement, Blair, is right on the money. It's developing skill sets and confidence in sustaining the recovery, but also developing access as well as the ability to utilize the capital, whether it be personal recovery capital within oneself or family and social recovery capital within their relationships or community recovery capital within their environments. There are a whole range of concepts. And I raise it at this point recovery in relative to the recovery wellness plan because more and more the research is showing, and our work here at CCAR is uncovering the fact that there's a real connection between planning recovery wellness and helping people to think about recovery capital and how to utilize it. So if you're, as familiar as you are with it, continue to think about it, continue to utilize it. Probably somewhere down the road. I'm not going to promise, but Claire, I think there will probably be a webinar related to that as we can begin to uncover more that we're understanding. In fact, one of the research papers that I identified spoke about recovery capital informs recovery wellness planning or recovery planning. What that says is that the more I know about a person's needs for recovery capital, the more potential there is for recovery. Wow. Well stated, Beth. I just asked Stacy a few minutes ago, can we transcript this conversation because I want to get what you guys are talking about. See, folks, for me, this is the power of our work. The ability to do what we do and then to teach each other what we do is the ability for all of us to expand our awareness, our knowledge, and our skills and our tools. This is great stuff. Well stated. Thank you for participating in this process. I see the utilization of the concept of building a life. I'm really locked into that. How do we help recoveries build a life? How do recoveries develop the blueprint for building their lives? Recovery wellness planning, identifying recovery capital to strengthen that planning, identifying resources and helpers that strengthen that process. And that's much of what I see as recovery coaching doing and being. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments on this slide? Can I move on? As we're winding down this PowerPoint, we're going to add a couple of pieces just to have you think about things that may or may not be going on in your own practice. This speaks about completion of required paperwork towards the end of the session. Be mindful of the time, and as you are approaching the end of a session, make sure that you have met any expectations on you for reporting or evaluation that includes a response from the recoveree. Does that make sense for you? Any questions? Has that been a part of your work thus far? Is there required paperwork at the end of a session that might meet these kinds of formats? This deals with probation. Some people need to get things signed to show that they've attended certain things. Yes, yes, good. Let's look at some action steps, review as we close. Ask the recovery to review what was accomplished in the session. I think this is a very powerful. Let me go back to what you're saying, Beth. We try to have as little paperwork as possible so not to water down the coaching process. Yes. But also, I need to be able to track what's going on as much as possible with minimal paperwork as possible. Good point. At the end of this, towards the end of the session, let's ask the recovery to review what was accomplished in the session in their own words. You add your own thoughts to that. You review any action steps that either of you had committed to during the session. You discuss the next meeting time and place. You remind the recovery to bring their recovery plan with them. And you conclude the session with thanks, gratitude, and hope. What are your thoughts on this action steps review and closing slide? Yes, especially encouraging, Blair. And we want them to be encouraged at the end of the session. I like that. Yes, I agree, Beth. Do they get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'm gonna get that.
Oh, good. So I can just go to the next piece. Some inspirational quotes to help. You'll have a copy of this. Ask yourself if what you're doing today is getting you closer to where you want to be tomorrow. And again, this has been part of our discussion. It's a dream until you write it down, then it's a goal. Remember, you're the most important person in your recovery. And the first step towards getting somewhere is to decide that you are not going to stay where you are. Very inspirational and encouraging. Any questions or comments as we wind down this webinar? Any questions or comments that you have on anything that we've talked about, or your impressions of the webinar and its value to you? I do the same, Beth. In fact, I actually do it a lot through messaging from my phone and emails, and I make people aware that I'm going to do that, and many times they look forward to it. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's great to make connections with you as well. Again, folks, my mode is learning, doing, and teaching, and the opportunity to do these webinars is such a powerful opportunity to learn from you and what you're doing and how you're doing it and the impact of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I hear you, pal. I hear you. Anything else, folks? This has been fun. Thank you. Same to you, Blair. Enjoy your day as well. It was great to make the connection with you. Oh, great. Thank you, Beth. And thank you so much for teaching us so much that you've taught us today. And keep up that good work with young adults. Very much a need to figure out how to help them and what's going to be most helpful in the process of helping their recoveries. Excellent. Excellent. Take care, folks. Be well and lead wellness.